Bear with me. Bear with me. Bear with me. Yo, Astro, thank you for the cash app. My man, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Okay, so the first 10 minutes of this movie. You can apply the dysfunction to black people, like almost indiscriminately. That's how telling the first 10 minutes of this movie is. I know it makes fun about white folk and poor white trash. I'm watching this and I'm like, this is black people. This is what black people have become. Holy shit. So let's get into it. So there's a monologue. And it says, human evolution is at a crossroads. Natural selection, instead of favoring the best traits, began to favor a different set of traits. Okay? The strongest, fastest, smartest reproduce, are supposed to reproduce in the greatest of numbers. Okay? Science fiction always portrayed humanity as more civilized and more intelligent. There's a dumbing down. Evolution does not always reward intelligence. With no natural predators to thin the herd, evolution began to reward those who reproduced the most and left the intelligent to become an endangered species. Who are we talking about? Who are we talking about? Okay, so now, there's these two case studies. Now, like I said, yeah, these are white folk, but you see black dysfunction in this shit all day long. So let me get into it. The first case study is Trevor and Carol. Trevor has an IQ of 138. Carol has an IQ of 141. They're being interviewed. They says they're waiting for the right time to have kids. It's something you don't rush into. All right. The second case study. His name is Cleavon. Cleavon has an IQ of 84. His wife Trish is pregnant again. He has children named Cleavon Jr., Faith, Brianna, Cletus, and Kylie. He asks Trish, I thought you were on the pill. Trish says, hell no. These are poor white trash. Right? So then 5 years later, because this case study is continuing. 5 years later, Trevor and Carol agreed to not have kids with the way the market is trending. Trevor says it wouldn't make any sense. Back to Cleavon. Trish and Cleavon's girlfriend Brittany, who is the mother of Trevor, are fighting. They're bickering back and forth. They live next door to each other. Okay, right? So for all you polygamists, you got the wives living right next door to each other, and they're fighting over Cleavon. And Cleavon's like, "What in the fuck?" Okay, while the kids are running around on dirt bikes. Okay. Cleavon had a son named Tyrone with Mackenzie. Trish bore another son, Dylan, to Cleavon. Another 5 years goes by. There's cracks in Carol and Trevor's marriage. These are the smart people, okay? Carol is having difficulty in conceiving and she blames Trevor. Carol wants in vitro and says Trevor has a low sperm count. On the flip side, Cleavon Jr. has an IQ of 78 and is a high school football star. And he's fucking all the cheerleaders. Cleavon Jr. is dealing with Kayla, Caitlin, Rebecca, Gabriella. He has children, Destiny with Kayla, Kaylee with Caitlin, Mason with Rebecca, Mason and Diego with Gabriella. Okay? You got to keep track of this shit. It's crazy. Cleavon Sr. got into a boating accident and impaled his crotch. They restored his sexual functions through stem cells repair. Cleavon then goes on to have more kids. Cleavon Sr. Courtney with Aaron, and with Brandy Antonio. And then with Brittany, there's Jack, Trevor, Seth, and Ariana. 5 years later, Trevor died from a heart attack while masturbating for the in vitro process. Carol has frozen her eggs and is waiting for the right guy to come along. We go into a timeline of 80 years from now, and Cleavon's bloodline has massively expanded. There's even some black women in Cleavon's bloodline. He got some black great grandkids, and the bubble timeline. You have to watch this movie just for the first 15 minutes so you can see Cleavon just. His progeny is ridiculous, and they're all retards. Okay. So that's the case studies, right? This is what has happened to the black community. Certain traits have been favored over others. And you see that with these children. You now have children shooting and killing their parents if they're told to get a job. Now, even though I'm gonna be honest, that's some immigrant shit. Okay, let's be honest. That story is an immigrant problem. But for the most part, the offspring of a lot of these unions is not the best thing for black folks. So yes, if you're gonna ask me, does there need to be a thinning or a culling? Yes, 20 should have happened 20, 30 years ago. But I'm moving on for the sake of the movie breakdown. Okay, so then we come to 2005. A military librarian is being replaced. His name is Joe Bowers. There's a human hibernating program. They want to save their best men in their prime. They want to freeze them in their prime and then use them for later use. So the plan is to freeze Joe for a year. Okay? Joe was selected because he was the most average. He had no family, no children, no nothing, no ex-wives, no nothing. They then select a sex worker to pair with Joe. They will be placed in hibernation pods for 1 year. Okay? The officer in charge, Collins, so they get placed into the pods. They get locked away. The officer in charge of the program, his name is Collins. This fool got arrested for a prostitution ring with Rita, her pimp. His name is, what was his name? Oh, shoot. Oh, what was his fucking name, y'all? Upgraded or something. His name was Upgraded. So in the flashback pictures, he's played by Scarface. I believe it's Scarface. But so the officer in charge got popped for prostitution, okay? And the project was forgotten. So over time, humans became dumber and incapable of solving simple problems. There's a garbage avalanche. And then Joe's pod opens up into the apartment of a man watching TV eating cheese. Okay? It's 500 years later. It's 2025. Okay? So then Joe wanders the street looking for help. The human language has dumbed down to hillbilly, valley girl, and inner city slang. It's a hodgepodge of inner city slang, valley girl, and hillbilly. Joe could understand them, but when he spoke, he sounded very pompous to the locals. Now, there's a word they use in this particular movie to describe how someone from the future would sound to, or from the past would sound to them. It's the F-bomb. I'm not gonna say it here, but in this movie, they use that term. Oh, you sound. Are you a Effie? Because you sound Effie. You're talking like an Effie. All right. So to them, when you don't speak their proper language, they equate you with that. That's a term of a derogatory term. Okay. It's crazy. Okay. So then a water fountain shoots out liquid infused electrolytes. We'll get to that in a minute. Joe goes to a diagnostic center. It's March 3rd, 2025. Joe is labeled as tarded. Joe doesn't have a tattoo for payment. They're like, how are you going to pay for this? You don't have, where's your tattoo? Where's your tattoos? Everything's paid through a tattoo on your arm. Okay? Joe looks outside and then realizes the gravity of his situation. Moviegoers watch a movie about butts. Carl's Jr. So a lady's trying to buy Carl's Jr. for her children. She can't afford to pay. Carl's Jr. calls DCFS on the woman that's unable to pay for food. Joe is then arrested for failure to pay his hospital bill and having no UPC tattoo. Joe's public defender, his name is Fritz, is the same guy's apartment that his pod washed into. Okay? Joe is sentenced. Rita, then, she wakes up out of her pod. She tries to call her pimp and gets money from a would-be John. Okay? She doesn't realize time is 500 years into the future. Okay? Joe gets a tattoo. His new name is Not Sure. He takes an IQ test at gunpoint. Joe is then sent to the house of particular individuals. That's jail. All right. Joe is then threatened by an inmate. Joe then tells the guard he's to be released and he's in the wrong line. So this is how dumb this future is. So Joe's like, hey, he goes to the guard. He says, hey, I've already been to prison. I need to be released. It's time for me to go. And the dude slaps him and says, you retard, you're in the wrong line. So he goes to the freedom line, where the release line, okay? So then the other guy goes to look. He says, well, I don't see you here. He says, well, go look around the corner. So then he breaks out of jail, literally runs out of jail, okay? There's the masturbation network. Joe goes back to Fritz, his public defender's apartment, and then tells him the attorney tells him there's a time machine. Police then show up to the attorney's house. The attorney covers for them. They look for Rita's pod. They find Rita. They get Rita up to speed as they're driving. Joe's his barcode is scanned. So they're driving and there's lasers everywhere, and his barcode is pretty much scanned, and then it alerts the authorities to that particular area. So then the cops show up. They destroy the attorney's vehicle. Of course, they got out and escaped, but they shoot the vehicle up to shit. Okay. They then go to entrance 12 at Costco. Wait a minute. So in this movie, the spelling, you see the level of degradation, how they spell words. So they go to entrance 12 at Costco. Entrance is spelled E-N-T-R-I-N-S. Entrance. That's how they spell entrance. Okay. So they go to Costco. It's a mega city. So if you watch the new version of Judge Dredd, it's a mega city. That's what Costco has turned into. There's actual buildings sloped against other buildings. Okay, and there's homeless people, and so then his attorney says, "Oh yeah, I went to law school here." He went to law school at Costco. Now here's the kicker. So then Joe's looking around. He sees a Starbucks. It says Starbucks, exotic coffee for men. A latte is $200, a hot latte is $2,000, and a full body latte is $50,000. The H&R Block. It says H&R Block, adult tax return, home of the gentleman's rebate. There's a Polo Barranco, adult chicken, bucket of wings with full release. Okay, so as they're surveying their surroundings, Joe's barcode is scanned again, is pinged. And then Costco sends out a massive alert. Joe is then rearrested. Carl's Jr. reports that Joe's IQ is the highest in history. He's given a job as the Secretary of Interior. Joe doesn't want the position. President Camacho, played by Terry Crews. This character is like a combination of a former wrestler. He's a former wrestler. Yeah, it's Terry Crews. Need I say more? It's Terry fucking Crews. All right. Yeah, he's the 5-time SmackDown champion. Joe is then sworn in. Okay. So during the inauguration, or not his inauguration, American Express is replaced by American Express. Okay, so it's not American, it's American. It's WHI, American Express. They sponsor the swearing in. President Camacho says Joe is going to fix the economy, the dust storms, and burrito shortages, and cure acne, or they're going to throw him back in jail. Joe then picks his counsel. He hires Fritz, his public defender, and then secretly begins to looking for the time machine. So the plan for him, the plan is to find the time machine to go back into time, into his real time. Okay. Rita got charged for charging for sex and not putting out. Joe then goes to save Rita, and he fakes like they had sex, because it's a really big deal for you to take money from a John and not put out in the future. So you can see how heavily sex-based with all the stores, like it's a very serious crime for you to take money and not put out. Okay. So then Joe gets Rita up to speed. The crops are watered by Gatorade. It's by Brondo. Water was deemed a threat to Brondo's profit margin. Brondo bought the FDA and the FCC to buy and sell only Brondo products. Joe wants to replace Brondo with water. Joe said he could talk to plant. So listen, he's trying to explain to them why crops need water, and they're just like, but Brondo has electrolytes. That's all they know. This is the level of their intelligence. So Joe convinces the people. He says, hey, I can talk to plants. The plants said they want water. And they go for it. And they believe him. You understand? All right? So then they begin to water the crops with water. The electrolytes that they keep referring to were salt buildup in the topsoil over decades. It killed the plants, which led to the Dust Bowl. Okay? So then all crops were switched to water. It caused Brondo's stock to plummet, leading to 50% unemployment. Half the population is out of a job overnight because they switched to water. Riots didn't take place. Joe's blamed for this. Okay? Fox News anchors, when they report the news, they're scantily clad. So you got a guy that's shirtless, a buff guy is shirtless, and you got a woman that's in the lingerie. Okay? Joe is on trial and sentenced to 1 night of rehabilitation. The word depiction, so they're showing the artist rendition of the trial, right? And it always says artist depiction. The word depiction is spelled Dupicshun. Okay? Joe tells Rita to tell the people to use water, or to use their brains and keep painting, because he told her she was a painter. She never told him she was a sex worker. All right? Joe has to defeat 2 monster trucks. These monster trucks have giant penises devices attached to them. Like I said, sex, the male phallus is a very important theme, underlying theme in this movie. So one monster truck has a pulsating dildo, right? The other monster truck has a spiraling dildo, right? Joe's car, the car that he has to drive, has like a little purple penis attached to the hood, like this little flaccid penis looking device attached to the hood. Okay? Rita then looks outside the White House and notices flowers have bloomed. So Joe's plan worked. It just took a little time. She races to save Joe from rehabilitation night. The crops have bloomed everywhere. Rita then shows President Camacho the flowers. He doesn't believe it. Joe manages to get both monster trucks to destroy each other. Joe has to face Beef Supreme with a flamethrower. All right. Rita then hires a cameraman to accompany Fritz to broadcast proof of the water crops. Joe makes an impassioned speech to put water on the crops. The cameraman and then Fritz, the public offender, get into a fight and finally broadcast the sprouting crops. Joe is then saved. Okay. Rita then tells Joe she doesn't want to go to the time machine. She's going to be the CEO of Starbucks. President Camacho makes Joe his vice president. Joe then decides to stay to help fix the country's problems. The time machine isn't a time machine. It's a carnival ride. And it's spelled Maccheen. Joe becomes president. Rita becomes the first lady. They have 3 of the smartest kids in the world. Frito, the public defender, is vice president. He takes 8 wives and has 32 of the dumbest kids. Idiocracy, people. Idiocracy. Gasp. All through this, I'm sitting. Listen, all through this movie, I'm just like, this is black people. This is black people all day, every day. Do you know how many people? Listen, no, real shit. I had a bunch of people like, yo, Sly, you need to check that movie out. Check the movie out. You need to really see this movie. What are you doing? I had a lot of requests for this movie. I was just not really trying to, you know what I'm saying? They really get into it. Like, wow, right? Okay. Okay, so I don't got running